So that's a brief glimpse of what we do around the world. And the great thing is we are headquartered here in the UK. Our headquarters are at Whitley, which is just outside Coventry. And most of our facilities, 3 of the 4 factories we operate, are here in the Midlands. And of course, we have one up in Liverpool, and we're launching the engine factory. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. Our employment has rocketed. Just to give you some facts, we, as the video said, we sold 350,000 cars last year. That's up 30% on the previous year. 85% of those cars were export, and this year the sales are going to be even higher. In the past 2 years, we've increased employment by 9,000 people directly. That's a 30% increase in our employment, and this includes 600 graduates over that period of time and an equal number of full-time apprentices, so recruiting people at both ends of the spectrum. And that success has meant that we estimate that we've generated probably more than 30,000 new jobs in the supply chain just here in the UK. But by global standards, we're still pretty small, something like a fifth of the size of BMW, probably the world's biggest premium car maker. Now, we want to grow, and our exclusivity is an advantage compared perhaps with our bigger German rivals. But we need to be clear that we're in a very, very competitive set of competitors, basically in Germany and elsewhere. And that is a theme that I'll come back to later. We seek to make our customers feel special, and we offer an experience that's not possible with bigger volume brands. Jaguar Land Rover is now successful and highly profitable, but that wasn't always the case. And I don't need to go back too many years to share with you the struggles that the UK manufacturing industry, and particularly the automotive industry, had. And it was a difficult time, and it took many years to recover. But now we're held up as a shining example of how the renaissance in British manufacturing has happened without any prompting from us. I think it was quite remarkable that both political leaders referenced Jaguar Land Rover in their leadership speeches at the recent party political conferences, a first of many firsts that we've had. So in many ways, the past was paralleled by that of the UK manufacturing industry. And as we've said earlier, the Industrial Revolution began here. Britain made things, and we were the best in the world in manufacturing things. We were better, we made better quality, we did things faster, and we were more profitable than anybody in the world. And it made our country prosperous, and it made this city extremely prosperous. And it made this country the richest nation on earth. Then for a number of decades, maybe even going back to the early 1900s, we kind of lost our way, and we forgot a number of important things. We forgot about the importance of engineering and design and manufacturing. And to be candid, the most inventive nation in the world stopped having confidence in inventing, particularly in the world of automotive and other big engineering activities. So they were dark days, and I can assure you that myself and my colleagues don't forget that, and it's a huge stimulus to us to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and in one sense don't forget that we are up against very significant global competition. And we became complacent in those days and believed it was a fine time, fine to concentrate on financial sector and service industries. I'm not making a political point, but it was just the way the country thought it could earn its living. And as we stopped investing, and as we stopped inventing things, and we stopped engineering, so China, Germany, Japan, the US, Korea, Singapore, many other nations decided that they would continue investing in engineering and manufacturing, and they still do to this day. So although we are getting better, and the whole narrative at the moment within the politics, within business, within economics, within academia, is all about what are we going to do to keep the industrial rebalance in the economy, keep industrial strategies going. We must never forget that those competitors haven't stopped doing their own manufacturing industrial strategies. They still want to be competitive and pull ahead. So the Industrial Revolution has now gone global. It's never stopped. It simply goes on and it's relentless. And you just think, when I started my career visiting dealers in this part of the region, the concept of us manufacturing in China was like cloud cuckoo land. In that brief time, I like to think it's brief, about 25, 30 years, look how the world has changed. And the world is going to change even quicker and even faster. So we have to be on our mettle to keep up with those changes. And it's a challenge that I think we as a company can embrace. And I think, as I said earlier, the country is up for that challenge. And the UK can lead once again in the engineering and manufacturing field. So what is that investment? What's driving it? And I'd like to touch on a few points and use, if I may, Jaguar Land Rover as an example. As you know, we will soon be producing new fuel-efficient engines at a brand new factory in South Staffordshire, very, very near here, investing £500 million. Now, it's kind of, we pass over very quickly. We're going to build a new factory. It's like we do it every day. This is the first time that Jaguar Land Rover has built an engine factory in its history. Normally, we buy our engines in from other people because it's a big investment. Even more risky is that these engines are lower displacement engines. Normally our products have had typically high capacity engines, V6s, V8s, and we're investing in smaller 4-cylinder displacement engines. So we're building a new factory for the first time, and we're investing in engines that they're going to take us into segments that we've never competed before, and we're going to design and engineer them ourselves. So it is a big risk for us to take this decision, and we're really lucky to have a shareholder in Tata that's prepared to back those investment decisions. For those of you who follow us, we announced plans at the Frankfurt Motor Show, quite deliberately in the heart of the German automotive industry, that we're going to invest a further £1.5 billion in a new lightweight aluminium product range built at Solihull for our Jaguar brand. And we're going to enter a segment of the market that we haven't been in before. Two things about that are high risk. Going into a segment that's dominated by the Germans and going in with a technology, a lightweighting technology using aluminium that we're masters at, and we like to think we have global leadership, but doing it in the volume that we're planning to do is a huge step forward. So those are two examples of how our investment strategy isn't just kind of a normal investment strategy. You have to take risks to grow the business and be globally competitive. There's some other challenges facing us, and the need to engage more young engineers to the opportunities are opportunities for us to focus on. But also, and it's great that there's a lot of conversations and a lot of actions happening in this space, but government, industry and academia need to work even closer together to develop the skills that we need to be an advanced engineering country. It was a former Prime Minister who once listed his priorities as education, education, education. And he was definitely right about that. Whether he delivered on his promises is a moot point. But this education deficit that we have compared with other successful industrial countries is something that we have to address. And Jaguar Land Rover is prepared to take leadership on that challenge in terms of our apprentice programs. We're sponsoring University Technical College and other items. But at the end of the day, if we can't get government and we can't get academia to work with us, we'll be a bit of a lone voice. So there's a huge challenge, and I think it was Andrew and I were talking earlier. You may well have seen the survey that was done on the educational standard of the 18 to 24-year-old age group. 22nd out of 24 countries in the world. That's a pretty appalling indictment on our investment, and you can't blame the kids. It's the system that has caused that to be the case. So collectively, we really have to do something about it. And it's a huge worry for my company, and another aspect is our engineering investment. The Royal Academy of Engineering says that by 2020, we're going to need twice as many engineering graduates and 3 times today's number of engineering apprentices if we're going to meet the needs of the Advanced Manufacturing Centre. That's 200,000 engineers. A lot of engineers in this country have got the grey hair. They're going to retire one day despite the delayed pensions and everything else. But we have to have a conveyor belt now, which is significantly greater than we have in the past, delivering engineers and designers of the future. And it's just terrific to see the investment that you're making at this university in new buildings and new faculties for engineering. And again, probably a risk, I don't know, in the university world, but a great example is if we're going to solve these problems, we have to take leadership and do something about it. So just as we lack enough engineering resource, another aspect is the investment in R&D. And I'm not going to bore you with loads of statistics, but another damning statistic is that the UK invests under 2% of its GDP in research and development. That's well below the global average of 2%. And in Germany, US, other emerging economies, they invest 2.8, even 3%. Now, they may seem small movements in terms of percentages, but when you think about the billions of pounds and dollars those differences account for, it's huge. And I guess my point, without being too miserable about it, is do not underestimate what is going on in other economies around the world in investing in the future. It's terrific that we're beginning to change our behaviours, but we've got to do a lot to catch up. So the OECD also came out with a stat that we're 24th in the world in terms of engineering graduates. Attracting people into the engineering world as a great career, and about 25% at the moment, and it's going down, thankfully, but still 25% of engineering graduates, when they graduate, go and do something else. So unless we do become globally competitive, businesses' ability to innovate will be constrained, capping jobs, capping exports, and the wealth and creation that we need for this country. To give you an idea of the support, and this is not an appeal for government bailouts in this country, far from it. We would advocate exactly the opposite. But the fact of the matter is, in the depths of the crisis 5 years ago, the US government bailed out 2 of the biggest car makers in the world. Billions of dollars were invested in those businesses to keep them running, otherwise they would have gone down. And as I say, I'm not arguing that we should do the same in this country, far from it. But if you've got governments behaving like that, that does change the global context in terms of which we're offering. The French government has just recently provided Peugeot with $1.2 billion in loans, actually for their finance company, because if their finance company didn't have that injection, it would have gone down and it would have brought Peugeot with them. Now, some people may argue that that was the right thing to do to save the company, but at the end of the day, we don't have the benefit of that. We don't intend to get in trouble again, but it just gives you an example of the context in which we're operating. And then on the technical side, in Aachen in Germany, there is a syndicated automotive university, a technical university at Aachen. Their budget, just on automotive, government funded, is larger than the 7 catapults that exist in this country through the Technology Strategy Board. That's just on automotive. So it's an awesome sort of context and competition that we're facing in terms of government investment. Collaboration between industry and academia is, I think, really important, and it's great to see the initiatives that are coming together. And we like to think that we're taking leadership on many of those initiatives, but our other competitors based here in the UK are also great examples of what can be done. Germany's been doing it for 35 years. Regardless of political government, the relationship between industry and academia has been fairly constant for the last 35 years. So we've got to find a way of and I'm not advocating that the German model is right, by the way. It actually has many flaws in it. But there's a consistency in terms of how industry and academia work together, which we haven't had in this country. I'm actually quite optimistic that it will change. I think that both political parties, the major political parties, see industrial strategy as a cross-party challenge rather than a political challenge. But whatever we come up with as a solution has got to give us the capabilities to close the gap. So we've got to operate faster than the German system to close the gap against those competitors. Aachen has more researchers and professors than any technology-based university in Britain, and they're just focusing on automotive. So, you know, we have some of the greatest universities in the world. We have a fantastic reputation around the world for research in science and other specific areas of interest. But we've got to speed up on this side-by-side innovation and make sure that we can match the Stanfords, the MITs, or the Aachens or the Berlins. Now, one of the reasons we've set up the National Automotive Centre for the National Automotive Innovation Centre, is that we believe that we need to take leadership in setting up a campus at Warwick of automotive advanced innovation and design. We're spending about £100 million a year with the Warwick Manufacturing Group. It's a collaborative project, and we're already basing something like 200 of our researchers on the campus there, so that they're right at the cutting edge of advanced research and design to create the products that we need for the future. And working and the spin-offs on things like our largest hybrid team based at Gaydon, or the largest hybrid team in the UK based at Gaydon, are examples of where that learning from academia is flowing through to our technical centre at Gaydon. We're looking for, as I said earlier, we're looking for world leadership on lightweight composites, bodies and chassis. If you're lightweight, you take weight out of the vehicle, gives better performance, reduces CO2. Very easily said, but actually having the technologies that are world beating, again, we need to be right at the cutting edge of research and design. So the combination of the work with WMG and the investment we're making in the National Automotive Innovation Campus is an example of where we want to make sure that right in the heart of the Midlands, at Warwick, there is a reputation over time that we can be globally competitive in innovation and design. We may not have the scale, but we certainly have the intellect to do that. And the impact for the rest of the region, I think, will be hugely positive. We're also the lead partner working with Tata Motors at the Warwick Manufacturing Group for taking on a number of initiatives in a technical centre, again on that campus. And we're also investing in a UTC, a University Technical College, where we, with other people, will be able to train up school kids to actually follow a curriculum that's suited to our needs and our suppliers' needs. I know there are other UTCs around the country. And again, whatever you say about the politics of it, it's a great initiative for us as business to get nearer the cutting edge of the education curriculum and develop our future engineers and our future employees. We take our responsibility in terms of talking about engineering to school kids very seriously. We already, in each of our centres, we have an education and business partnership centre. We routinely have school kids of all ages coming through those centres, showing to them the importance particularly of the STEM agenda and what it means to be good at STEM, and therefore how it's relevant for business and future careers. And we've got more than 200,000 children participating in our Inspiring Tomorrow's Engineers programme to encourage them to consider careers in the automotive industry. So our interest in engineering and developing that talent of the future, as you can see, embraces a whole range of activities. Again, some of them are about maths, but some of them are about taking pretty significant risks. And it brings me on to one of the things that we have to take leadership on, but something that you obviously can consider, is the old-fashioned view of manufacturing. How many times do we talk about manufacturing, particularly out of the sector, and the impression is still of those dark satanic mills with smoke coming out of the chimney and people working in appalling conditions. Going off script a bit, we recruited recently some people up at Liverpool. It's actually one of the first places where we increased our workforce to meet demand. And to our shock and horror, if you work on an assembly line now, you have to be pretty good at statistics and you have to be pretty good at communication. Why? Because anybody who works on the track, the team use statistical tools to make sure that the processes of assembly are in control. And if you get a kid turning up from school or somebody coming into the job and they don't even know how to read a bar graph or a run chart, and then they can't at the end of the shift stand around and communicate the issues that they've had to their team leader, which really aren't super advanced skills if you think about it. We had to go away and train those people to develop the skills ourselves. Now, I think that's an appalling indictment on the system. You can't blame the kids, you can't blame the people who came in, but that's an example of the gap that we've got. I guarantee in Korea, in the US, in Germany, any kid that comes out of school can read a run chart and a bar graph. So that's a graphic example, and they work in modern facilities. The health and safety, the spotless. Those of you who've been around our factories and factories of our competitors in the automotive sector, they're absolutely spotless. So we've got to do something about changing that perception that's out there, that if you go into manufacturing, it's oily rags and it's dirty and it's not very sexy to go into as a career. It's an incredibly inventive business. We have to do everything from aerodynamics to lightweighting. We sell in 179 countries around the world. There's about 40 legislative systems that we have to meet. The American, emission systems are different to the European systems, so we have to engineer and develop our cars to those specs, and also take consumer interests into account. Right down to, how much rubber do we need on the tyres to give the optimum performance. So incredibly detailed, incredibly complex, and then of course you've got all the great design work that goes on. So what I'm going to do now is just share with you a project which I think encapsulates everything that we do in terms of engineering, a concept product. But if you listen to and you see what the technology that goes into the CX-75, I think it gives you an idea of how complex our cars are nowadays.
Jaguar has always been about trying to combine design and technology and innovation. For the 75th anniversary of Jaguar, we wanted to try and show something, we wanted to try and demonstrate something that expresses what Jaguars of the future could look like and be like. We needed to show how the design language can be relevant in the future. We needed to show how we could deliver performance and lightweight in the future, and we needed to show how forward-looking technologies could be delivered within that package.
The key message here is it needs to be a sustainable supercar, a relevant supercar to today's environment. So it's performance clearly with that responsibility as well. We're talking in the region of the top speed of greater than 200 miles an hour. You can use it under fully electric mode. That's when the vehicle is operated purely from the battery cells. Under that mode, there's just under 70 miles worth of range that the vehicle's capable of delivering. Then there's the charge sustaining or range extended use. And that's when the turbines effectively charge and top up the battery cells. And under that operating mode, the vehicle will have a range of 900 kilometres. When the turbines power direct to the 4 electrical motors which are in each of the 4 corners of the vehicle. And that's how we deliver the 0 to 100 kilometres in 3.4 seconds. I think the CX-75 is very much a beacon for the future. It really starts to showcase our expertise in cutting-edge design and intelligent use of new technologies, but in a sustainable manner.
So a great example of combining technologies at both ends of the envelope. For those of you who, and there are always some people in the audience who say, well, why do you need a car that goes 200 miles an hour? How many people have been to Germany? You can drive de-restricted on the German autobahns. Our competitors drive at 200 miles an hour, and they can legally. So that's why you need a car that drives at 200 miles an hour. Not many people do, but you have to have that capability. And clearly these cars, have to look, all of our products have to look good and be attractive. And as we've said earlier, we sell in 178 markets around the world, and all the inputs, whether it's from the USA, UAE, Russia, Romania, China, important insights in terms of how we design in our cars at engineering and engineer them at Gaydon. And that's a critical differentiator for Jaguar Land Rover. Whilst we're delighted that we have manufacturing competitors here in the UK, because it helps build up the supply chain, the big distinguishing difference about Jaguar Land Rover is all of our cars are designed and engineered here in the UK, as well as the innovation that I talked about at Warwick. Most of the other manufacturers who produce cars here, that engineering and innovation work is done offshore in their home countries. So we have to be conscious that we need to build up our competitive product development capability as well as our manufacturing capability to make sure that those manufacturing investments we're making here in the UK are sustainable. In the last three years, we've increased the number of engineers and designers working for us here in the UK from 4,000 to 7,000, so a disproportional increase, positive increase in the number of designers and engineers. And not only have they come from the UK, but we're starting to attract some of the best engineers and designers from all over the world. And again, we shouldn't be worried about that. If the best are coming to the UK, that's something that helps us maintain our competitiveness. And we want to make sure that we are at the forefront of this relationship between the supply base, academia and government, continue the momentum that started, particularly by the Automotive Council in our sector, but by other initiatives, so that we can build this capability to continue to generate great cars and great designs that sell around the world. So Germany is not just the world's most successful manufacturer of premium cars, and actually we're the second largest. But it is a world exemplar of joined-up thinking. And I know I've referred to it a couple of times, and I'm not suggesting we copy their model, but I just want to reiterate that the benchmark is pretty awesome. 20% of Germany's GDP comes from the automotive sector. So it's absolutely embedded in their economy, and we've got to be conscious of that. Now, it's fashionable to say, and it's very, very reassuring, that the UK car industry is now a success and it's a global success story. And indeed, in many ways it is. This morning on the radio, we've produced collectively, all manufacturers, 10% more cars this year, 1 million cars, one of the highest production levels that we've ever achieved in this country, which is great news. But again, to put it in context, this year 70 million cars are going to be produced in the world. So we're producing 1/70th of the total production in the world. Now, I don't say that to scare people, but it just, again, puts in context the environment that we're up against to punch above our weight, which is in all of our interests. We have to be globally competitive. We've already reviewed our organisation in the sense that the board took a long, hard look at itself last year and said, okay, this success is really terrific, but what are we going to do for the next 6 or 7 years? Are we going to carry on doing what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years, or do we have to operate differently? And we've had a pretty fundamental restructuring of both our processes and responsibilities on the executive committee, because we know if we don't change, we'll become complacent and those competitors will take us out of the marketplace. And again, that was high risk. A lot of people said, well, what's the problem? You know, you're doing well, you're making a lot of money. I've been in the company for 30 years. It's the best it's ever been. But if you don't change ahead of when the change is needed, you'll lose the initiative, lose control of the agenda, and start losing business. So, you know, we've changed ourselves. I think the industry is changing, the supply chain is changing, government attitude is changing. So whilst I may have daunted you with lots of contextual points that makes it pretty frightening, I think actually the opportunity is there for us to take. But I would ask a question of everybody in the audience. When we think about what we're going to do in this region, about capitalising on the initiatives that the university are taking in terms of investing in new buildings, other companies are taking in their investment, Jaguar Land Rover's taking in terms of its investment region, what is everybody doing to think about the approach? What are we all doing about skills? What are we all doing about investment? What are we all doing about perhaps taking a few more risks to take leadership as a business community in driving the region forward? Particularly in the sectors, and you know, Wolverhampton, I remember in my old days, a huge success story and still very, very important for the aerospace sector. You know, we've got to be clear that that the aerospace businesses come here because there is some expertise in the region, but we have to build on that and be even better. We can't go back to the days of the past. The past has gone, but we can look forward with real confidence about the future and build on our successes. So we do have many world-class engineering companies in the UK, not least Jaguar Land Rover. And our recent growth has proved that our technology partners and suppliers have the opportunity to work with us. But again, they need to step up to a different level. If you're working 3 shifts at a factory, great news for the PR. But what does that mean for the local infrastructure? What does that mean for local suppliers? You know, 3 shifts means that people are coming to work at 2 o'clock in the morning and working through to 8 o'clock. You know, what does it mean for how socially you handle that in the local community? So I would submit that, you know, manufacturing, the rebalancing of the rebalancing agenda, if you like, manufacturing is led by engineering and product development. If you don't invest in product, and this is our strategy, people often say, well, what's the secret to Jaguar Land Rover's success? Very simple. If you don't invest in new product, if you don't take a few risks with those products, if you're not innovating in a globally competitive industry like the automotive industry, you will lose your way. And I would argue that's what happened in the 80s and 90s in this region. But we're beginning to turn the corner. We're not complacent about the opportunities that are ahead of us, but we're ready to take them. The restructuring that's going on in the automotive sector and industry and manufacturing is going to take a long time. It's going to challenge us, in the next few years, not the next few months. There isn't a switch that you can flick and say we've resolved it. And it's very complex. It involves a lot of stakeholders from right across the business spectrum, as I've indicated. So we're spending ourselves £2.75 billion a year on R&D and research. To put that into context, that is 5 times as much money as we used to spend 5 years ago a year. So we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is in terms of investing in the future. And if we want to be competitive against the Germans and others that are coming up, we have to make that commitment. But to make that level of commitment, we also have to earn the money to fund that investment. So we have to grow, which is why we're growing not only here in the UK in terms of our manufacturing footprint, but in markets like China and others. So in conclusion, what I've tried to do is give you a frank and honest assessment of the state of the UK industry, the UK car industry in particular, and my company obviously in some detail. A company that I think is demonstrating our success in innovating like ever before, and not only innovating in product, but innovating in processes, innovating in the way that we manage our people, innovating in the way in which we manage ourselves. There's been much progress since the awful days of 2008, when the world collapsed, and the re-emergence of companies like my own. I think the crisis was a great. You always find out about your friends, about your capabilities in a crisis, and a lot of us will never forget those dark days, and they are a stimulus to why we won't be complacent in the future. There's a lot of great initiatives going on in the country. You know, the TSB, catapults, the work the government's doing, as I said earlier, with the Automotive Council. But if we're going to make Britain a truly great centre of manufacturing and engineering again, we must really consider how collectively we can focus even more, move faster, take more initiatives, yes, take a few more educated risks, so that we don't, if you like, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And once again, this country, started here 20 miles up the road, can re-earn its reputation for being a world-class centre of engineering. And you know what? Not so much in this country, but one of the reasons our customers buy our cars in overseas markets like China and the US, California, is the great British design and engineering. That's what they say. I bought that car instead of a German car because I believe in British design and engineering. And that's a tremendous accolade for us, and it's one that we're determined not to throw away. So, a few thoughts. I'm more than happy to take questions. But before that, just to demonstrate that we do have a positive future despite the global context I've shared with you, just a short video about how we feel about our business. no apologies that featured a whole load of new products, just to make my point. Thank you very much for your attention. I think it's a really, so I don't know if you heard that at the back, but the question was about seeing that we use suppliers overseas. I mean, and are we committed to Britain in terms of our supply base? The stats are we use about 50% of our suppliers are sourced here in the UK, and about 25% in the region. So half of the UK sourcing is in the West Midlands region, and we take in half from outside of the region, and that's something we do want to change. Now, some of the commodities that we source overseas, and I'll give you an example: gearboxes. The capability for the UK to produce competitive gearboxes at a cost that we need, to the quality that we need, on time that we need, regrettably isn't available to us in the UK. So we have to take those gearboxes from a supplier that's outside of the UK. Actually, I mean, in the automotive industry, there's a lot of shared supplying. So it's one that supplies the German competitors as well. But a lot of what I've been saying this evening is absolutely about how does the UK build up its supply-based capability in a global environment that's globally competitive and allows suppliers to see the UK as a good investment bet to base their operations here against a past, not over the last 4 or 5 years, but over the last 25, 30 years, that's been checkered at the best. And just think about this: if we persuade a supplier to think about coming back to the UK, he's got to he's taking a risk, because he's got his established base. He can ship the goods to us, you know, and these days of cheap goods being shipped from China are long gone. You know, it's normally Europe or a market like that. They've got to make a big commercial decision to come here, and they want, you know, the agenda that I've talked about for us is exactly the same. Are the skills right? You know, what's the local labour force right? What is the local education system like for the managers that I'm going to bring to run the plant? All these things are pretty generic. And my challenge, and one of the reasons, you know, I'm delighted to take on this review for the Labour Party. It's an independent review, by the way, independent from the Labour Party and independent from Jaguar Land Rover. But why I'm personally delighted to take on that challenge is I think some of those questions have got to be answered in a long-term, sustainable way. Well, there's two answers to that question, actually. If it's working well, you keep it running. You know, I can't talk about our future product programs in detail. We never do. So anything you read in the press is pure speculation. However, what I will say is that we did announce at Frankfurt that with this new aluminium advanced technology that we've developed, we do want to go into the price segment that's beneath the XF, which is got a lot of volume opportunity around the world. So, you know, it's not a direct replacement for the X-Type, but you know, that product, when it comes, will be in a pricing segment that's more accessible for a lot of people than we currently offer on the Jaguar range. So when that comes along, I hope we can tempt you to keep your heritage classic, but also buy the new product when it's available. But also, I thought you made a very interesting point, because it's not trivial about your apprenticeship experience. And I think there's a growing clamour, if you like, across the whole of the industrial sector, manufacturing, that what are called old-fashioned apprenticeships, which got put to one side in the 80s and the 90s. They're coming back, and as I said, we're very committed to that. But I hope that we see a much more serious focus on apprenticeships as well as graduates in developing the economy and the manufacturing sector here in the UK. I couldn't possibly comment. Look, we've got enough on our plate maintaining our global competitiveness in the automotive sector without worrying about energy strategies. Having said that, as I said, and our sponsor department is BIS actually, and I think we as a company in the sector has forged a very good relationship with BIS. And simple things like if you do have three shift working a day, that means the plant has to be powered up 24 hours a day. And that draws down energy and resources. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of industrial energy planning. Whether they've got the right or the wrong answer, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment. But just let's say there's a challenge to make the two join up. The other thing which I think is really interesting, and we're very focused on this, is a lot of industry is now working on how can we be self-sustainable in an energy sense. So how much can we do to reduce our energy costs? And we've, for example, take water, we've reduced our water usage by 20% over the last 3 or 4 years, because that's a cost to us, but it also pays benefit to the environment. So I think you'll see an increasingly focused approach by industry to reduce its demand on energy, but at the same time making sure that governments have a strategy that supports the investment that we're making. We take it really seriously, and if you want real, the details, in fact, a colleague of mine, Les Ratcliffe, can share the details with you after the presentation. But we sponsor a number of programs, both at the school level, through the whole higher education spectrum, to get more females into engineering. Actually, we're having a little bit of success in the design world, because they're part of the broader engineering community, and increasingly, in fact, in the graduate cohort that we had in September, it was the highest mix of female, and by and large, our graduates are engineering graduates. Of the 300, 250 or so are engineering or design people, and it was the highest mix of females that we've ever had as a graduate intake coming in. So it's a long journey, but we're absolutely determined to make sure that the mix is much more balanced than it has been in the past. And again, we spend a lot of time working with schools, with careers advisors, to demonstrate that a career for a female in engineering is as exciting as it is. You don't have to be a boy to design cars anymore. I would argue, thank goodness in some cases, but no, it's very much part of our people development strategy. It really, at the tenet of what I said this evening, is it's hugely important. In a way, we can't rely on just government to come up with a solution. So increasingly, we're very keen to, we're very conscious of this impact that we may have on other supplier companies as we set up our facilities in this region. And we're trying to work strategically with all the relevant councils and people responsible in that area to make sure that we do it in an appropriate way. There's a market out there that at the end of the day will decide, but to have some joined up thinking. And we've got some initiatives that we think will at least help. They won't solve the problem in total. But I think the bigger question is how can, and I think it is a regional question, how can all the key stakeholders in terms of skills development work together regionally to tackle the skills need of that particular region? Even in our company, the skills that we'll be requiring for the engine plant, the engineering skills for the engine plant, will be different to the manufacturing skills that we'll need in Solihull, will be different to the design and engineering skills we need at Gaydon. So even within a sort of 50-mile span, there are different precise needs that we need. I mean, software skills at Gaydon is a huge challenge for us. There's 100 times more code in a car now than an aeroplane. So to get really global class electrical engineers is a challenge. But yeah, I think there's a great opportunity, and whether you like the LEPs or not and other business forums, we should grasp the opportunity that those forums offer for us to do more cooperation. We have certainly, particularly for what we would describe as our, fast movers or talent development programs. We actively encourage those people to get involved in mentoring because it's part of leadership at the end of the day. So forgive me, I don't know if we actively have a program with the university here, but I know with most universities where we have facilities, there are programs that we run to mentor students, individuals, or in fact cohorts of students, and our engineers, designers, even professions like accountancy do get involved in those mentoring programs.
Sorry, how big is that in terms of numbers?
I would say, as you can tell, I don't know. I would say it's hundreds of managers get involved in mentoring programs, one way or the other. 200, 300, 400. Thank you for the loaded question. I'll give you an objective answer. Logistics is hugely important. We have chosen a strategy on logistics which says we'll outsource it. So as you know, in the automotive sector, that's not uncommon. Not everybody does it, but most do. One of the things that if you visit one of our plants now, and you hear about lean manufacturing, things have to be governed, literally down to the second in some cases. The cycle time for some operations on the track is 40 seconds. Now, if you're moving that fast, you can't have all of your stock just built up on a daily basis. It has to be delivered by the hour, or in some cases, on a 20-minute schedule. So our view is that our competence is in terms of assembly and manufacturing rather than managing logistics. And the contracts are long contracts, but when they come up for renewal, we're looking for the best provider in the business that can meet our requirements. I don't know if that's unloaded enough for you. So the answer I'm going to give to this is a Wright review answer, not a Jaguar Land Rover answer. If I may, it's important we make that distinction. The review will look at every part of the supply chain. So clearly infrastructure will be part of that. They have already commissioned John Arnott, who was the guy who did the Olympics. He's already published a report on infrastructure strategy for the Labour Party. It's publicly available, you can get it on the web. And having read it, a lot of the items you raise, he's made recommendations on how they could be addressed. It is a strategic weakness of this country that the infrastructure is not competitive.
Especially in terms of manufacturing.
In manufacturing, moving goods, the whole integrated system as well. And that's before you start talking about airports and railways and all the rest of it. I've got to compliment the audit because I wondered how quickly HS2 was going to come up, so you've done very well not to ask it before. Look, to be clear, the decision to base the engine plant in Wolverhampton was a number of factors. And actually, wherever we went in the UK, as soon as we decided we went to go to the UK, infrastructure compared with overseas wasn't a good benchmark, but the trade-offs were worth having. And actually for us, with our factory locations, Wolverhampton is perfect, as long as the M6 is working, because we can go up to we can go up to Halewood and down to Castle Bromwich and Solihull, where the engines will be used. But it's a serious issue. If the M6 stops for 3 hours, we'll probably have 10 trucks stuck, and ultimately the production line may have to stop. So that's a cost and an inefficiency. So it's a big question for us. In terms of trains, we use them. So although they're not fast until they get into Europe, we do use trains to ship a lot of our cars to mainland Europe. And we've even looked, I don't think we do it now, but we did look at shipping trains down to Southampton, because Southampton docks is our biggest kind of distribution area for shipping cars overseas. But to give you, the industry works really cleverly together. So the boat that goes across to the US with our cars, we share with BMW and other manufacturers, because it makes no sense for us to all have our own ships, and it helps CO2 and all that kind of activity. But could we be smarter and quicker? Absolutely. And I don't know where the HS2 agenda is going to go, but the question that business is asking is, what does it do for freight? Birmingham Airport, the new expansion there, what does it do for freight? That's what's on our mind. Not a lot to the brand, actually, being pedantic. A hell of a lot to the business. I think we're fortunate to have probably one of the best shareholders in the automotive business. And I could spend a long time talking about Tata and our experience, but just let me sum it up in two phrases. When Mr. Tata bought Jaguar Land Rover, a lot of people said, well, why have you bought Jaguar Land Rover? And he said, on public record, he said, I always thought it was an opportunity purchase. I didn't realise Ford was going to sell it. But when it came on the market, I always thought that Jaguar Land Rover could deliver more potential than hitherto it had achieved. And I think I can help that potential be fulfilled. And ever since that day, even through the crisis, the whole direction we've had is fulfill that potential. Grow, put products into more segments, grow your global footprint, And they take a dividend, like any shareholder does, but they encourage us to reinvest every penny we make in future product. And I'm sorry it was a sort of stuck record about product investment, but that's the heart of it. So I think they've given us permission to grow the business. It's an awesome responsibility to fill the gap, because it's very easy to say it's hands-off management. They're not hands-off. But when they say, okay, you go and develop and grow the business, that's a big change in attitude and a big change in leadership style. So I think we're immensely fortunate to have somebody like Tata owning us. And if you go on their website and you look at their values, particularly in what they call societal contribution, ever since Tata started, which may surprise you, in 1868, their whole business tenure is you have to put something back into the community, because it's a virtuous circle. So that's in essence what they've brought to us. They've given us permission to grow and flourish. We're one of the most highly regulated industries in the world on safety. So we have to operate in that environment. A lot of the technical innovations that we and others have introduced over the last few years have been all about safety. And I didn't want to mislead people about the CX75. Actually, the safety criteria that went into that product was as onerous as any other project that we've done. Regulators hold us to account in terms of our safety standards. So in Europe, they're very onerous. In the US, they're different standards, but equally as onerous. Even the emerging economies put in, very onerous standards. But our view is that we need to be ahead of the regulators. We shouldn't rely on regulators to set the standards. So if we can come out with new initiatives, and whether that's, adaptive cruise control, to make sure that, if you are on cruise control, there is, there's an automatic system that puts in braking. A lot of work now going on in terms of even things like tiredness monitors. So if the driver feels like he or she is tired, that things will be picked up in terms of the dynamics of the driving style. And interactive and intuitive systems that allow, just think about braking systems, where they were and where they are now. It's bizarre, isn't it? Our braking systems now are so good that there is a switch on some cars that actually disables the real ultimate braking system, so that people can have a car which brakes like old cars. And that's what our innovation and our technology drivers, safety both in isolation but in a collective sense, it's a hygiene factor. You have to have leadership on it. And the other thing is it gives the designers huge challenges, because one of the things we have to do is what is known as pedestrian safety. So we have to have systems that if a car unfortunately hits a pedestrian, the pedestrian is protected as much as possible. And that does cause the designers huge headaches, because all designers want, wedge-shaped, aerodynamic cars, and they have to find a way of getting around that. Fortunately, we've got two great ones who can do that. Absolutely. And, one of the things we're doing is the UK government, to its credit, cross-party initiative, they've put up this Queen's Award for Excellence in Engineering. Winner gets £1 million. It's a global competition. It's focused on engineering. And we're absolutely delighted to be a sponsor of that. So that's right at the top of the global spectrum. The Royal Academy of Engineering are behind it. But on a more sort of local level, yeah, I think everything that I said this evening contributes to getting, our desire is that will we get in this country engineers to be revered as much as they are in Germany? Maybe not. But can we get it to be considered as a good profession with the same reputation as, we're not saying we shouldn't be in financial services or the service industry or banking. The UK's got a great reputation in terms of those sectors. But engineering, design and engineering should be at the forefront of everything we do. And the brand of engineering, hugely important. And we like to think that by leading by example, because engineering isn't just about sort of putting things together, it's about designing and engineering. We like to think we're leading by example. Yeah, as I said, thanks for the question. As I said earlier, ideally, we'd like to source as much as we can from the UK, and we do, as long as it meets the criteria that makes our products competitive in the world. So cost, quality, and delivery time. I think with all the initiatives that we're taking, that mix will improve. Will it get to 100%? Sourced in the UK, I think it's unlikely in the near term. But do we want to do better in the UK? Absolutely. And we're hoping that a number of initiatives that we're taking, particularly with the National Automotive Innovation Centre and the work we're doing at Warwick, will encourage really high value, high tech suppliers to come to this country so that we don't have to rely on the other economies to provide those commodities in the medium and the long term. But to expect that we're going to source 100% of our components from the UK, I think is unrealistic, to be candid.
Okay, that's